Hi everyone. The scale and volume of government announcements seems to be slowing down finally. This last week or 10 days has been very tumultuous, and I'm sure there's been a lot for you to catch up on. Now it's weekend, I think it's time to take a breath and reflect on where we're at and what's happened over the last week or 10 days. My first video talked about understanding your own current financial position, both in terms of your property portfolio and personal situation. We've also shared with you information that we've shared with our tenants, both in terms of cleanliness, but also more importantly, financial assistance. And also more recently in recent days, financial assistance for many of our contractors who are self-employed. I think for us, we're certainly taking the time this weekend to reflect on what's happened recently and what comes next. We've watched tonight's government briefing. They are focusing now quite rightly on the health aspects and supporting the NHS and other support services where necessary. In terms of where we're at, we've been in touch with all of our landlords, our clients, who have been overwhelmingly supportive of our approach and also very sympathetic to the needs of our tenants. We've been in touch with our tenants on a regular basis over the last week to 10 days, pointing them in the direction of the various government guidance that has been issued, and most recently we've been in touch with our contractors, reassuring them that they're still on our trusted supplier list and that we hope to resume business with them as soon as possible. I've also pointed them in the direction of the government guidance, again if they've not yet had chance to find this for themselves or be aware of what support is potentially available for them. We're now, for us personally as property managers, we're coming to the pinch point now where some of our tenants are in the position where they're unable to pay their rent. We are working with them sympathetically. We obviously understand their situation and being quite clear with them, however, that the rent is still due. This is really just going to be a repayment plan. It's very early days yet, so we haven't put repayment plans in place for a lot of our tenants as their situation is still unknown. So as an example, we have one tenant who is a kitchen porter. He was effectively laid off or told to go home about 2 weeks ago now. It's still unclear from his employer as to whether he's actually going to be laid off and made redundant or whether they're going to apply for the job retention scheme. What we're finding with a lot of our tenants, they're employed by small businesses or small manufacturing or non-essential businesses. And for these businesses, yes, they can apply to HMRC to have 80% of their staff's wages paid, but these payments aren't going to hit them until the end of April or May. And a lot of these small businesses are in financial difficulty themselves and simply don't have the cash reserves to be able to pay their staff in the meantime. So what we're seeing is tenants being employed by such businesses are actually being laid off rather than being offered the job retention scheme. So these are the challenges that we're currently working through at the moment. I appreciate that the private rented sector is much more diverse than what we focus on, so we tend to focus on single lets and HMOs. I was involved in the NRNLA webinar yesterday, which is the new name for the merger of the NLA and the RLA. It was actually really informative and really helpful. They were also talking about serviced accommodation. I've shared a link recently on the government guidance on this, in which that says that all commercial activity in serviced accommodation needs to cease unless you are providing accommodation for vulnerable people or key workers. So that's good to know that those people can still access accommodation at this time. And the final aspect of the private rental sector, which we're not involved in, but I know some of you might be, is the student sector. My understanding from the webinar yesterday is that student grants are still going to be paid in full for the summer term, and therefore the ASTs that you have in place with your students are still valid and they're still due to pay the rent. Now, obviously there are people who are dealing with overseas students who have simply returned home to their home country. We have a few tenants who've done the same. They've literally handed the keys in and disappeared home pretty much within 24 hours. So in these cases, it really is on a case-by-case basis. You need to communicate and negotiate with your tenants as to what is reasonable in terms of the rent or any deposit that you withhold in lieu of a notice period. Obviously, we need to be cognizant and sympathetic of everybody's situation. So unfortunately, there isn't one size fits all answer here. It really does need to be taken on a case-by-case basis. So anyway, I hope everybody is keeping as well as they possibly can under the circumstances, and I do hope you've got a little bit of time this weekend to reflect on what's happened and to get ready for any further announcements that we might see next week.
And here is our daily visitor. He's not our cat, but he comes every day.